The Bookshelf with me, Ryan Tubridy, is brought to you by Eason, Ireland's favourite bookseller. And Eason have a rich heritage of book selling since 1886. It's probably where you got your first ever book, or maybe your last one, and hopefully your next one after you listen to this episode of our podcast. So stay listening for Ryan Recommends, of course, my weekly recommendation, where I'll discuss a book I've read recently that I think you'll really enjoy too. And make sure to browse your local Eason store for your next book, or explore hundreds of thousands of titles online at easons.com. Order before 6 p.m. for same-day dispatch and enjoy free delivery when you spend over a tenner. Whether you're after the latest bestseller, a hidden gem, or a classic read, Eason has you covered. Eason, be inspired. Welcome to the final episode of The Bookshelf. This is season 3, and I have to say thank you, by the way, to you all for listening and for watching. Our guest today is somebody I'm really, really privileged and happy to see here today, because she's somebody who I've interviewed down through the years, whether it's on chat show, on radio, and I've also had the pleasure of meeting her off campus and in the wild, if you like. She's one of my favourite people to meet because she's warm, she's funny, she's smart, and she's engaging, and she's kind. And she's the former President of Ireland, 2-term President of Ireland, Mary McAleese. Welcome, Mary. It's good to see you.
It's great to see you, but it's particularly good to see you at this wonderful stage in your life. We hear great news about an engagement,
yes,
and wish you so much happiness, because God knows you deserve it.
Well, thank you.
And I remember back to the dark days, and I remember writing to you during those dark days and giving you one piece of advice, which was, there is life after RTE. Yeah. I should know.
You should know, because you were there for a spell.
I had dark days there too. Well, a different type, but dark enough days. Days that made me decide, I just can't stay there anymore.
Yeah.
So I know what the dark days are as you move into a new chapter, the shape of which you haven't shaped yourself.
Yes, that's right.
And you just don't know. But anyway, with your talent, we always knew that the shape ahead would be good, and it is.
The beautiful thing about darkness is it makes the light feel much brighter.
And warmer. And it is for you. We're so pleased.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate you saying that. But I don't want to be, it's not mutual appreciation society here, but I've always liked meeting you because you make an interviewer's job very easy, because you love to chat. Yeah,
well, Martin always says to an interviewer, particularly if he sees people coming like with about 20 questions, he'll say, I'll give you a tenner if you get 3 in. Yeah.
Tell us, let's go back to little Mary, Moira Ogue.
Yes.
And there you were as a youngster. Were you a chatterbox as a kid?
I probably was.
Yeah, tell us about who was there siblings-wise and family-wise.
I'm the oldest of 9.
Yeah.
And born in a place called Ardoyne in Belfast. And I was born in a street of just tiny 2-up, 2-down houses, and my parents, both country people as it happens, one my dad from Roscommon, my mum from the Mournes but by way of Derry, and so my mum was married at 19, she had me at 20, my dad was 26 years of age. They had met in a small hairdressing salon in Ardoyne, where my father's aunt from the west of Ireland, from Roscommon as he was, had a small hairdressing salon. My mum was her apprentice. My mum was one of 11, well actually 10 because one was dead, but there were 7 sisters, 3 brothers who lived in, again, the same back to back with the tiny 2-up, 2-down house that I was born into. My granny's was right behind.
Yes.
So I had all this mass of relations, all Mammy's relations, a lot of my father's relations, because his mother was the only one of her sisters who stayed in the west of Ireland. The rest had all come to Belfast.
You're describing what looks like the movie Belfast, the Kenneth
It is, yeah. It's
Do you know what
all
I'm
those
saying?
little streets.
Terrace,
can you imagine?
Warren.
Yeah, and then dominated, of course, by the Catholic Church, the Ardoyne Holy Cross Church, which was sort of the centre of gravity of everything.
And became a major headline many years later.
For all the wrong reasons.
We can come back to Father
for all the wrong
Troy
reasons.
and everything.
So anyway, I was born. I was the first of their children. Born and of course the apple of their eye. And by which time my father and mother were saving up to buy their first home, because they'd rented their first 2 homes, and they bought a small semi-detached house. We were the only Catholics in the street. First Catholic family to move in. Made loads of friends that our friend, thank God to this day, I always think it was a great gift, because as you know, so many people in Northern Ireland, the vast majority, live in areas that are essentially ghettoised. They are either Catholic or Protestant, but very little intermingling. But then we were the first, and so many decent people in that street befriended us. 1 or 2 families essentially boycotted us, but It was no big deal.
As we know in life, there's always one or two.
Yeah, there was always one or two, and you always knew that from the others that they were doubly befriending you just to show you how good and kind they wanted to be. So those people are friends to this very day. In fact, my younger sister, Nora, God rest her, she was bridesmaid to one of our friends that we made there, Florence Maxwell. Florence was our defender because anywhere we went, you were in danger of some kind of an attack. You know, as a Catholic kid, there was always somebody ready to throttle you. And she was like the Rottweiler that went everywhere with us.
Even as a little girl?
Oh, yes. The local parks were pretty much Protestant parks. Yeah. And so if you went there... You went there, in your peril or at your peril, but she was terrific because she could see trouble coming at her because most of the people who gave us trouble were people she went to school with. So I never knew how she kind of finessed that on a Monday. Yeah. But anyway, the interesting thing was she married a Scottish soldier, and she asked my sister Nora to be her bridesmaid.
Really?
And that was hilarious because my entire family then decamped to the barracks at Lisburn where she was married. And actually, the very doing of that at that time in the early 1970s, in the middle of the Troubles, as a Catholic family and as Catholic girls, could have earned us tarred and feathered, being tarred and feathered.
Tell people what
but we got away with it.
Tarred and feathered was.
People were,
because there's generation listening and going, what is she talking about?
Yes, well, it was if you fraternised with what were regarded as the enemy, which in, the Catholic community, the Republican community, would have been regarded as the army, British Army at that time. Girls, particularly girls who associated with British soldiers, would have their hair shorn and tar poured over their heads. And feathers then stuck on that just to make sure that they were very noticeable and as a warning to the others.
Which is common.
It wasn't common, but it did happen.
It did happen.
But then there were other ways of slighting you or making you feel awful. In fairness, I have to say none of that ever happened to us.
Yes.
We just got away with it. And because from the very early stages, like my parents never did bigotry.
Yeah. What an important thing to say.
And that was good.
Where did that come from?
Well, they're country folk and
just good people.
Just good people. And subsequently, when the oldest of my 5 brothers, my brother John is profoundly deaf, and he was unfortunately attacked when he was about 17, just outside our door, alighting from a bus. And he was attacked, and these guys tried to sever his arteries with broken glass, broke a bottle over his neck or over his head, and then slashed him, left him bleeding profusely from an artery.
You made a sign across your throat.
Exactly. I still don't like to think about it terribly much.
No, I'm sorry. Okay.
But what happened then was we had a parade of people who came to our door because we knew who did it, you see. But they were never prosecuted because the young man who was the ringleader, his father was a very big wig in the Orange Order. So, and I'm saying that because the police officer involved told me that. Emphatically told me that and was disgusted.
What age were you at that point?
I was 20.
Yeah.
Just a couple of years, maybe 19.
It strikes me as you're talking about this incident, you're looking into the middle distance and you're kind of going there for a minute. Yeah. I mean, I can sense that I'm getting a little tingly because I'm quite horrified by what you've just described, almost in a casual way, if you don't mind me saying so, because this was the quotidian in your life as a young person in Northern Ireland.
That event was an interesting one in many ways because there was a parade of people then came to the house wanting, the word got out who the guy was and wanting my father and mother to say, go get them. And my father and mother were both adamant, no, absolutely not. Leave it in the hands of the police. And if that doesn't work, leave it in the hands of God. He's alive. We were very lucky. We lived very close to a hospital, within a kilometre of a hospital. And so his life was saved, which was wonderful. Thanks be to God. But the night that it happened, my mother, we had wooden shutters up on the front of the house to prevent fire bombs coming in. Imagine living like that you had to have shutters. You couldn't even see, you couldn't have light coming in your window. And so with these big shutters up, just huge big pieces of wood, essentially. What we hadn't planned on was the fact that they would use machine guns when they came, so the wooden shutters weren't much good. But that night, my mum and I were sitting in the living room, and we heard this strange noise, like a screaming. Now, up the road from us, there was a youth club. And sometimes the kids would mess about and you'd hear them yahooing. But something about the sound bothered me. It just didn't sound right. But my brother was 17. I had never heard him scream. But he is profoundly deaf. So his voice is different from yours and mine because he's never heard human speech. And literally, I'd say about 30 seconds into this yahooing, as we thought, it hit me, God Almighty, this is not the youth club. That's my brother, John. Something about the timbre of the voice. And I ran to the door just in time to see him being literally half carried, half dragged by an elderly man who had seen everything. And a local neighbour, a Protestant man who was just beside himself with just the most awful upset. And he too, he was able to identify the boys. He knew who they were because they were locals. I mean, they were neighbours' kids. And so, but luckily enough, I was at the door. The phone was at the door. I phoned for the ambulance. We didn't wait for the ambulance because he said to us, get him to the hospital. And so the hospital was close by and we shoved him into the car and got him to the hospital, thanks be to God. But the trouble with that is the trauma of that stays not just in the family, but it stays with him and colours his life, as many forms of abuse do.
How old is he now?
He's in his 60s now, had his first stroke in his 30s.
Yeah, he carried it. He carried it. You described...
Carried it with a fear, a terrible fear.
Do you believe a society can carry that fear?
Oh, I do. I think,
do you know what I mean by that?
Oh, yes.
I mean...
Oh, Ryan, look at Northern Ireland.
Look at Ballymena.
Look, exactly.
More recently. And by way of explanation, you saw particularly, it's a loyalist area.
Correct.
And they decided that there were two young fellas who were up in court for alleged sexual assault charges. They happened to be Romanian, as it turns out. And then people went crazy on the streets trying to house. I mean, this was like something out of Mississippi burning, right?
And the police just called it pure racism. Pure bigotry, pure racism.
That's progressive in some way. But what I felt looking at that story, you tell me, because this is your world, and I hope I'm not being one of these, Dublin centric creatures. What I felt too was there was an element of that's still a trauma. That's not of course that's racism. No doubt about it. But I just feel there's unresolved trauma, unresolved,
unreconciled. I think one of the great tragedies about Northern Ireland is, yes, great things happen with the Good Friday Agreement, and if you look at the progression from then, there's been good things. Sometimes we've had a government, sometimes we haven't. It's been up and it's been down.
Yes.
The kind of what I might call the strands of reconciliation at a very deep level that need to be done in order to secure an egalitarian future, parity of esteem, a fearless future for everybody, that still needs to be done. Yeah. That's a big ship to be turned around because it's generations old.
Yeah.
It's generations old.
Let's talk about books for a minute or two, because even though I could talk all day about everything else, and we might return, but you as a youngster at home, where were the books coming from?
The books, my father and mother left school early. My dad left school at 14, my mum at 15.
Right.
They were both avid readers.
Wow.
Both really hungry for education, but they missed out because they couldn't afford second level education. My father say 14, mum at 15. Mum would love to have gone on and been a nurse. My dad would have made a fabulous history teacher because, like you, history buff, knew everything there was to know about local history. He'd one day off on a Sunday. He would take us, my sister and I, and then the progression of little ones. He would take us never just on a walk.
Oh, I love this.
He would take us to somewhere with a story.
Isn't that lovely?
I knew Kilmainham when I was about 5.
I bet you did.
Yeah. I knew Inch Abbey when we were 4 or 5.
Yeah.
He would take us to places with a story, and my dad was a storyteller par excellence.
Yeah. Was it library? A lot of library time?
And then the other great joy, just down the road from us, a 15-minute walk, the Carnegie Library. I had it haunted.
Yeah.
For 2 reasons, actually. One, the books, and beside it there was a bakery where if you walked home and saved your bus money, you could get what they called a penny worth of scrapings. And that was the tail end of the nice fancy things like a Swiss roll or chocolate rolls. Just the tail ends. Yeah. They would gather those up, really crumbs, and roll them up. And for a penny, that was saving your bus fare. You could, so you'd call into the Carnegie. That was your excuse. You called into the library, you see. Yeah. You got those. Then you walked to the place and got the penny worth of scrapings and walked home. And your mum couldn't really give out to you, even though your dinner was completely a waste of time.
Yeah, ruined.
But you had the books.
I love that.
Yeah, you had the books.
So you've always struck me as being one of the most intelligent people I've ever met.
Oh my God.
And no, I really
Thank
mean
you.
that. So what I'm intrigued by is you as an 8-9-year-old, right? With this little brain, well, massive brain, but this young brain. What were you drawn to? Were you drawn
bathroom.
to
The bathroom.
The bathroom.
Yeah, because it was the only place you get piece to
Please
read a book in the house.
Okay, so let's put you in the library, right? You go in on a Saturday morning, or whatever,
Yeah, I get my
and you're
books.
looking up. Go back to your age. You're looking up at all the shelves.
Yeah.
Are you going to geography, history, science?
No, adventure.
Adventure. Okay.
Oh, adventure.
Take us through some of the names or the people.
So, I mean, I'd be looking at, all the wonderful, the famous five.
Okay.
I love all that. I had them haunted. I mean, I lived, in my head, I was one of them, you see.
I love that.
And at the bottom of our street then, there was a big open glen that gave into a valley that was, forested, and it was the perfect place to imagine yourself having these great adventures. Yeah. So I would read the books and then I would write my own story for school. I mean, I wrote a book whenever I was about 8, I think.
That doesn't surprise me.
It was all completely cut and paste.
From Enid Blyton.
From Enid Blyton, I have to say. And and I lived inside my head, and then you see, with all, my mum had a baby a year. She had her last child, her 11th child, may I say, at the age of 38.
What was your mum's name?
My mum, Claire. She's 94 now.
And she's 94.
My mum is 94. Yeah.
So she's flying.
She's still going strong
and your dad?
winning. She's winning at bridge, and she's fantastic.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, my poor dad died a few years back.
And his name?
He was Paddy.
Okay.
Paddy Lenihan.
Paddy and Claire.
And Paddy and Claire.
Okay.
So anyway, but my mum. Back at that time now, there's a baby a year coming into the house, right? And so there's always like nappies, and we didn't have Dunnes stores or pennies then. So my grandmother and my mother too, they were fabulous providers of clothes. My mum was a machine for knitting. Her mother was a machine for sewing, and they handed all that on to me.
So you probably
I did not hand it on to my daughters. Yeah. If a button falls off a shirt, Mum.
Yeah, you're back in sewing.
What have I done with my life that I haven't been able to show you how to, sew a button? But I could do all that, and I still do.
Tell me,
I knit, I sew, I do all that stuff still, and I'm ashamed to say that my daughters have not followed in their mother's footsteps, regrettably.
Tell us about.
So that was it. So you were always busy. But here's the thing: if you sat down in our house, for 1 minute, something would be found for you to do. And so I learned early on that if you wanted to, as my mother would say, she's juking the work. It's a very northern expression.
Okay.
Juking the work. I would be in there was no en suites in those days. You had one bathroom between the entire family, and I had to go up the stairs, past the statue of St. Joseph, round the corner, past the statue of Our Lady, into the bathroom, lock the door, and sit on the toilet with the book.
With your book.
Yeah, with my book.
Give us your first, the book from your childhood today.
My favourite book from my childhood is D.K. Broster's The Flight of the Heron.
Look at that beautiful book you brought in with you today.
Look at it. It's
a hardback. It's still got the dust cover on it.
It's got the dust cover. To keep it clean.
Tell us a little bit about it.
I read this in my first year at second level school, right? I was 11, and I loved it because it was a story of Scotland with gorgeous names like Lachlan. I thought this was a wonderfully romantic name, and there is a bit of romance in it. And of course, there's also the pitting of the Scottish against the English. And you're learning now, it's not just the Irish against the English. There actually are other people don't like them either.
There's a few.
And and the romance of the Scottish Highlands, it has never left me. Like I adore every inch of Scotland. I've spent a lot of time in Scotland, and it started with that book, D.K. Broster. But here's the rub. We did this book in school. We studied this book in school. I loved every inch of it. I would, I'd get to the end of a page and I'd nearly cry because I'd have to turn the page. I didn't want to leave that page. I wanted to go back over it again and just dwell in it because the story is quite dramatic and it's also quite sad. There's sadness in it, and there's death in it, and there's killing in it, and there's fierce injustice in it. So everything that talked to me and spoke to me, I loved it. But then to discover that D.K. Broster was a woman. Well, that absolutely failed me, because D.K. Broster was going to a lot of trouble calling herself D.K. Broster to not disclose the fact to the world that she was a woman, because she knew perfectly well that as a woman she wouldn't be taken seriously as a writer.
Still happening, J.K. Rowling, and so many crime writers in the modern age are S.J. this and W.F. the other, and
there you go.
It's still going on.
There you go. And so to realise, I studied her at school without ever knowing she was a woman. imagine that.
What changed in your perception of the book when you discovered she was a woman?
It probably just trebled my adoration, because it's a book I keep going back to. You see, every so often I take it down.
Is it a comfort read?
You know what it is?
Yeah.
And it brings me right back. I'm at home in Ardoyne, in a happy home where we haven't been, put out. They haven't a machine gunned us out of our home.
Yeah.
Where we haven't faced all the trauma of the Troubles. So that book has meant, here it is. You can see it's well
loved.
worn.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, that's where I stopped off the last time I was reading it.
So here's this week's Ryan Recommends, brought to you by Eason, Ireland's favourite bookseller. And I'm going to go with The Counting Game by Sinead Nolan. Tells the story of a 13-year-old girl who vanishes while she's playing the counting game. Even the name of this book is as creepy as it sounds. This is a psychological thriller. The only witness to the vanishing of the young girl is an even younger boy who can't tell his story. So a psychotherapist is brought in, and she tries to untie the knot, and with that the mystery, and with that the closed town. Well, always closed towns, aren't they? And that's important because no one wants the truth to come out. I think you'll like this one too. Let's get back to the show. Mary McAleese, let me ask you, you've alluded a few times to a gun shots coming through the door.
Yes.
If it's not too much to ask you to give us a sense of what happened, because it sounds like the end of innocence for you.
It was the end of living in that home.
Yeah,
we never stood in it again.
Attacked?
Shortly before, first of all, just to backtrack.
Yeah, a little bit.
Two gentlemen of the loyalist persuasion stood in our garden and emptied the contents of 2 machine guns through every window that had a light on. You might remember that I said that we had shutters on to try and prevent what we thought would be firebombs thrown at us. So we had left lights on in the bedrooms above, and they fired into every one of them. My sister Nora, God rest her, her bedroom was like her bed was like a colander. That's all I can describe it as.
Lord.
Just awful.
Who else was in the house?
Well, here's the thing. The wonder of ignorance of people who live cheek by jowl. It was the morning of the 8th of December.
When everyone goes to town.
The Feast of the Immaculate Conception.
Yeah.
And my mother had, all the children in the house had been sleeping over in my aunt's. In fact, they were distributed around various aunts because there had been an attack on the house a few days earlier when a crowd of about 30 gathered and they broke all our windows. Any window that was still there they had broken, which was why we had these blessed shutters up just in the week before. And they'd also they'd murdered the Catholic man up the road from us. They'd shot him. So I was kind of fearful that we were next. We were the next Catholics on the road. And we were couch surfing at night, coming back to the house during the day, leaving it and leaving the lights on in the hope that they would leave it alone. But that particular morning, my mum came back to the house from her sisters, gathered up the kids. My sister Nora and I were over staying at the university with friends because I did not want my mum to stay in the house that night. Yeah. I was frightened. Yeah. And so they went out to First Mass, which was 7:00. And it was pitch black, of course. It was, December.
December 8th, yeah.
And when they came back, my little brother Clement, who was then, 2 years old, ran ahead and started to pick up from the ground the casings of the bullets and was so delighted that these strange things. And then my mother realised, she looked up, every window shattered, 2 machine guns emptied into the rooms they thought we were in. But thank God they didn't know anything about First Mass or Catholic mummies and the Feast of the Immaculate Conception.
What a twist in the road.
Many, many years later, when my youngest daughter, Sarah, was, 7 or 8, and she was in school, but at that time it was still a feast day and you got a day off. That's all changed now. And I said to her, come on, Sarah, get up, you got to get ready to go to Mass. And she said, what for? It was a Thursday. And I said, Feast of the Immaculate Conception, you got to go. She was furious. And then I thought, well, I'll try, instead of just doing the Catholic mummy thing, you must go. I said, actually, Sarah, this is a very important day for our family because on this day, a few years ago, when I was a young girl, bad men came to our house and tried to kill your granny and granda and all your aunties and uncles. So I think that we should go and say a special thank you to our Blessed Lady on the Feast of her Immaculate Conception. And Sarah looked at me and she said, "Sounds more like immaculate coincidence to me."
Oh my God. Oh my gosh.
I was going to kill her.
I would imagine on that day of days.
I was going to kill her.
Just for context, you were being attacked for being Catholics on the street.
That was the only reason.
That was the only reason. And ultimately you had to get out of there, clearly.
Well, we never stood in that house again.
You couldn't have.
We literally, that morning, the police came and said it was the worst attack ever on a Catholic family, though there have been much worse since.
If that was Serbia, Kosovo, we'd call it ethnic cleansing.
Correct. That's what it was, of course.
That's what it was.
That's what it was.
This was the year 1970.
It was 1971.
71, and you were at that stage. What age?
Well, I was 20.
You were 20, so you were a young adult. You were properly grown up, and
I was at university. And
were you terrified or furious?
Honestly, mostly terrified. I never really got to the furious stage, mainly on account of, I think, after my brother John was, the attempt was made in his life, something sort of settled in me. I was angry then. I was very angry. I even wrote to the newspapers and wanted those, I wanted those kids corporally punished, a thing I've never believed in my life. And my anger frightened me. And something about the overwhelming nature of it, and also my parents' response to it. I lived in a home where Daniel O'Connell was lionised. Yeah. And the idea of, if you have a problem, resolve it through dialogue, through discussion, through prayer, in our house, the case of our house. And something in me over that period of time calmed and sort of distilled into a try and solve the problem. Try and ask yourself, why do they act like this? Why are they like this? Try to understand. And so when all that happened, when the machine gunning happened, I was fearful, but I wasn't fearful so much for myself. I knew that my dad was also a target, and so he was. The same people who machine gunned us out of our home, or some of their mates, then came to his pub and they left a car bomb outside it. And my dad was fortunate. He got all his customers out through the back door, went to the front to make sure that everybody was okay, looked out onto the street. The bomb went off. And a young woman who had heard people shouting, get out of the way, she ran across the street thinking that her child was out. The child was actually perfectly safe. The child was round the corner and perfectly safe. But she ran, and you'd hardly credit this, the keys of the car broke her neck and killed her instantly. Now, all my father saw was a girl whom I knew well. Her brother was one of my close friends. He saw a girl drop and he thought, oh my goodness, she's just fainted. And he ran and grabbed her. And it wasn't until a cameraman from RTE who was first on the scene, a guy well known to both you and I, who had his own sorrows. His own brother is among the disappeared. You know who I'm talking about, Eugene. Yeah. He was the first on the scene. And it was he didn't know that it was my dad until after, because I didn't know him then. It was only later when I was working with him, he told me he was the person who came upon the scene and had to break the news to my father that she was actually dead. So picture this, my dad is larger than life, great, full of the stories, very funny man, very witty man. And he left our house that morning, happy out, and came home in a state of catatonic depression that took him a very, very long time to recover from.
Back to the damage.
Yeah. And he didn't speak. And we all, I laugh about it now. Some of the younger ones in our family don't even remember this, but I remembered how dreadful it was. So now we'd no home. We were couch surfing. We'd no business, no income. And thank God there was a bunch of nuns who had an old house over in the Falls, just off the Falls Road. They were intending to turn it into a nursing home. It was a big old wreck of a place, and it had been half burnt. They lent it to us so that we could gather as a family. And we did. That was okay. And but my dad, God help him, would just sit and sort of stare into the fire. He had a tiny transistor radio, and he listened to it all the time. But there was very little, there was no conversation out of him. He was lost somewhere.
You lost him, yeah.
He was lost. Yeah. And I came home from university one day. I remember coming in through the back door. And this is like 2 years later, near enough. My mum said to me, "You're not going to believe this." She said, your dad spoke today. I said, "Oh, what did he say?" He said, "Shut up to hell, you old bitch." I said, he said that to you? She said, no, he said it to some woman on the radio called Maggie Thatcher.
Oh, that's good. Well, that's it.
Maggie Thatcher was Minister for Education at the time.
Isn't that something?
And you know who? So we never knew what she had said that really deeply offended him. But it was Alistair Campbell who figured it out. And I told Alistair the story and he said, I'll tell you, what was the date? And I told him, he said, she took the free milk off the school children.
That is, and Alistair made the connection.
And we didn't. We had no idea.
So without Margaret Thatcher, your dad mightn't have spoken again. So
we call it the miracle of Maggie Thatcher.
That's amazing.
The miracle of Maggie Thatcher.
Let's go to the book that brings you joy, Mary McAleese. What book did you bring in for us today to talk about? The book that you turned to say, this makes me happy or makes me smile?
That was The Flight of the Heron.
That's joy.
That was my happy book.
And your happy book. And then, let's talk about the life-changing book.
The life-changing book.
What changed and what age are you?
This one.
Yeah.
It's called The Kidnapping of Edgardo Mortara.
Go on.
Written by a Jewish scholar called David Kurtzer.
Yes.
And it tells the story of a young boy who in 1854, age 6, was living happily with his Jewish family in Bologna, one of 7 children. The family were reasonably well-to-do. They had a little furniture business and they had employed a Catholic girl to look after the children. And when Edgardo, the little fellow, was 1 or 2, he had suffered from scarlet fever. And according to her, she had secretly baptised him, believing he was in danger of death. Now, in Bologna, the Catholic Inquisition operated in Bologna. And when he was 6, we don't know the whole story, but she seems to have got into some trouble with the Inquisition, and she told them about this child, Jewish child, who had been baptised. The soldiers of the Inquisition, these are soldiers of the Pope, arrived at the door and took the child away, on the basis that perfidious Jews were not capable of raising a Catholic child. So they brought the child to Rome. It became a great cause célèbre because the Pope effectively adopted him. That was Pius IX. But most importantly, here's another book. And this is the unpublished memoirs of Edgardo himself. He went on to become a priest.
Did he?
He did. And he was treated like a little prince. He was the pet of the Pope. And he's only a child, and
what a bizarre story.
Yeah, and it's Stockholm syndrome, of course.
Yeah, of course.
And then they send him to America in the early part of the 20th century. They send him to America where there's a huge explosion of Jewish immigrants. They send him there to convert the Jews, and even the Cardinal of New York tells him, go home, go away. We don't need you. You're an embarrassment. And you read the book that he wrote himself, the memoir, and it's possessed of a kind of, how would you describe it? It's possessed of such a degree of utter certainty that he was handpicked by God to become a Catholic, and how right it all was and how wrong Judaism is. And there's so little compassion for his parents, whose hearts and souls were shredded. Yeah. I mean shredded. But the story of Edgardo stayed with me. I spent a lot of time when I was living in Rome, down in the Jewish ghetto. Oh God, I still do. I mean, I still spend a lot of time in Rome. And I get off the plane, I get my first cappuccino and I head down the ghetto and I walk around that ghetto and my heart breaks.
Are you walking with ghosts?
Oh, I'm walking with the ghosts of children. The little children who were rounded up, during the Second World War. And they were playing outside, just close to the city centre at their homes, right beside the synagogue, playing happily, and along come buses. And I have to say, it's Italian people put them into them, not just the Nazis. Collaborators put them in, and they are taken off. And of the thousands who go, a handful come back, just a handful. So and it's all about the children for me. So I decided, now I know what I want to do my doctorate in.
And that book changed that.
And my book then becomes the next few years of my life consumed by children's rights and obligations in canon law.
There's so many places to go. Let me go back in time again to your life for a moment. You did work as a reporter for a while.
I did.
And you were on
RTE.
TV in RTE.
Yeah.
How was your experience in RTE? I'm not trying to have a go at
half
RTE.
Half of it was great and half of it was rotten.
Okay.
Yeah, the first half was wonderful.
You had a great time. You enjoyed
I was working at a programme called Frontline. I was working with fantastic people. I had a great boss, Peter Feeney, the best. He also understood Northern Ireland very well because he had worked there, he'd studied there, he'd lived there. He knew it. And we were in the middle of the Troubles, of course. Yeah. Then that all changed. The Frontline it morphed into Today Tonight. And we had got a different boss who was a different kettle of fish altogether. I just say, quite frankly, not a person that I like to work with. And it was a very unhappy experience because now we were right into the thick of the Troubles and we had the hunger strike, which was, of course, changing. It changed everything in Northern Ireland. People who weren't politicised at all, particularly Catholics and nationalists, who would never have voted for Sinn Féin, were sucked in, and suddenly Sinn Féin became a force to be reckoned with, essentially, mainly because the British government treated the hunger strikers just all the wrong way. Everything that could be done wrong was done wrong. And what happened with me was I knew that the boss had taken against me because I was a Northern woman Catholic, whom he dared to presume had views that I did not have, but he didn't know Northern Ireland at all. I mean, he really was. He wasn't a person whose judgment in these matters I could honestly respect. I'll give you an example. Simple thing. We were coming up to the election of in Fermanagh, South Tyrone, that Bobby Sands won. He was in prison on hunger strike
most
at the
famous
time,
hunger strike,
if you remember.
Yeah.
Quite a short time before he died, in fact, on hunger strike. And he was up against a very prominent unionist, Harry West, who had been a Minister for Agriculture. And essentially there only were the two candidates because the SDLP decided they wouldn't run a candidate. Now, you could argue all day about that because they would have split the Catholic Nationalist Republican vote. But they decided to leave it. And so I got out, I looked at the electoral register and I just did the sums. And there were about 800 votes between them, but those votes favoured Bobby Sands. And so at you know what a programme meeting is like. You sit around, everybody throws their halfpence worth in. And the election was on a Friday. We didn't have a programme on a Friday. So I innocently said, look, are we planning to have a programme on a Friday? Because this is going to be a very big event and there is always the chance that he could win. Oh boy, I was savaged from a height. And I wasn't just savaged for saying it. It looked as if it was what I wanted. I was talking as a journalist who had just done the sums. And I was made to feel that this was my agenda, which it absolutely wasn't. Yeah. And I said, look, there'll be cameras, the BBC will be there, Ulster Television will be there, newspapers and media from all over the world will be there. This is a major event. And no, so we'd no programme and we'd no journalists there, right? So the next morning, the Friday morning, I'm sitting in the office when a stringer rang in from Fermanagh, South Tyrone to say, of course, that Bobby Sands had won by pretty much exactly the number of votes I said he could win by. And the boss in the office came storming out of his office, past all the other people who worked in the programme, over to my desk. And he shouted at me, "Your man won." Imagine. Now, today, I would go straight to a solicitor's office and I would sue. As simple as that. I'd sue for defamation. I'd also sue for I'd sue for effectively
workplace.
Also harassment.
I think there's about 6 cases there.
Harassment, easily. I mean, I know that in a way I was cowardly in not doing that, but it was a different time.
But it affected you. I can see it in you, the way you're telling the story.
It absolutely killed me at the time. Anyway, it led to a decision to leave RTE. I could not in conscience continue to work with people of that ilk.
Yeah, I understand.
Or a person of that ilk.
Yeah.
In fairness, he has admitted since then he was wrong. That's fine. It took a long time for him to do that. And what happened then was he came and then it was coming up to lunchtime. This happened about noon, and people were going off to lunch, and a lot of people had deliberately disappeared because they knew I was in the right and they knew he was in the wrong, essentially. But then he came, I couldn't believe the cheek of him. He came and he asked me to go to Fermanagh, South Tyrone. Oh, yeah. And I just said, no, I've other things to be doing.
Yeah, I'm busy washing my hair that night.
No, I said I've actually got an appointment in Superquin, and which I did. I went to Superquin in Blanchardstown, got my groceries, and then I went back and I watched I watched the BBC's coverage, which we had to borrow. Our Irish language programme, they actually had time that evening, and they gave tonight a bit of time, but it was a story in RTE that reflected no credit on current affairs in relation to the North. In other respects, it was a very good programme, but it couldn't be trusted on the North. Anyway, time moved on. A few weeks later, the man died, and again at the programme meeting, I said, will we be covering the funeral?
Bobby Sands, yeah.
And one of the other journalists said, there'll be more cameras than mourners. And I said, I don't think so. Now, bear in mind, my family were all in the North. I was in the North every weekend. I was listening to what was going on there. I was picking up. I knew now that the Catholic population were on the rise, and Sinn Féin were on the rise. Yeah. And it wasn't whether I wanted it or not. It was just
journalistic fact. Yes.
And I was the lawyer who had read the Broadcasting Act and knew that we had an obligation to be objective and to tell the facts, not to make them up, not to invent them, not to have our own agenda, accept the truth as was presented. So anyway, what happened was I said that. Again, oh my God, I was lacerated from a height. So I said, fine. Of course, what happened was 100,000 people came to that funeral, and the next programme meeting I knew, because there was a wonderful guy I worked with called Forbes McFall, wonderful, wonderful Scottish journalist. Boy, was he a good guy. And he had done a programme on what was happening, this mobilisation of Catholic sentiment provoked by the British government's reaction to the hunger strike. And at that programme meeting, he did a programme anyway, broadcast, a very fine programme. But because he interviewed people who were saying that Sinn Féin were in the ascendant, members of the programme, a certain member of the programme called him a provo. So at that point I said, you know what, folks?
Yeah.
You'll never say that of me, because if you do, I will sue you for defamation. I said, you can't say that of somebody who's just trying to be a journalist and tell the story as it is actually happening on the streets. So, another member of the staff who was present that day was asked, was there violence? And he said, there was no need, because Mary spoke.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
And that was the day I left the office that day, and I said, in conscience, I cannot work in that environment.
Good Lord.
And I was very lucky, because I was walking down past Trinity College that day. I was in an awful state because my husband was now a full-time student. And I was back at college, and not only that, but we were in the throes of expecting our first child.
You had bills, you had rent.
I'm the only breadwinner.
Yeah.
But I know I'm walking away because I cannot possibly stay.
Big move.
And here's what happened. God is good. I'm walking past Trinity College. I ran into one of my old colleagues, and he said to me, what's going on? And I said, you're not going to believe this. I said, but I have to leave. I just can't stay in RTE. And he said, best news I ever heard. And so that was fine. I got home, and my old boss from Trinity, Robert Houston, God bless him, dead and gone now, rang me. And he said, I hear you've got sense. And I said, who are you talking to? Oh, he said, I was talking to Catter Asmal. God rest Catter. It was Catter. And he said, sure, I told you should never have gone to work there. And I said, well, I've learned that lesson now. And I said, so, I'm going to find myself jobless very soon. No, he said, you're not. Come back here. Yeah. So I went back to Trinity as Reed Professor. And happy as Larry.
You sent me that message when I left RT.
That's what I meant.
And said there is life. And it feels so much loaded. And I'm thinking of two things. One was Sinead O'Connor, who I had a conversation with shortly after my own incident. Sorry for bringing it to me, just for a minute, give you a breather.
Right. Why not?
And she said to me, you've been mugged by God in a hoodie.
I like that.
And I said, explain it to me so I know for the record. She said, well, you were going along in life and it was going fine. And this guy with a hoodie came over and he kicked you here and he punched you there and he walked away and you thought, who's this thug? And he put the hoodie down. It was God going, you needed that.
Yeah.
It's good, isn't it?
Yeah. And there's probably a lot of truth in that in my own case.
Yeah. You were mugged.
Because I had carried with me all that we had, suffered in Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
Bear in mind that I was now married, and And I had married in 1976 before I joined RTE, in fairness. But on the morning of our wedding, 2 of our wedding guests were murdered. And so that's not a great way to start your honeymoon. And I had carried the sadness of that. I still do to this day, actually. It's only literally in the last couple of years, as we approach our 50th wedding anniversary, which is next year.
Congratulations.
I decided that we would celebrate our wedding anniversary on the day. I couldn't do it. Do it the day before, do it the day after, but don't ask me. Just do not ask me to do anything on the 9th of March, because that's the day that Tony and Miles were murdered. They were, for me, they were my older brothers that I never had. I'm the oldest of 9. I always wanted older brothers. And up the street from us, where we were now living at the top of the Shankle Road, there was one other Catholic family, lived a few doors from us. And there were 13, I think, in that family. These were the youngest guys. And they were my princes. I freaking adored them. I absolutely worshipped the ground they walked on. And they did everything together. They bought a pub restaurant. And my father begged them, don't buy it. It's in a bad place. You're going to be, it's not going to be good. You're going to be victims. Don't. But anyway, of course, they were so trusting. They bought it in this, stupid loyalist area, and it became quite a famous place. The food was fabulous. And Martin and I, the last conversation we had with them was the day we went to plan to have our wedding there. And I still remember Tony saying to me, don't be ridiculous. He said, we can only hold whatever it was, 50 people. Your mal never settled for 50 people. She said, your aunties and uncles alone that would take up the whole place. He said, no. He said, don't hold it here. It's too small. So we came away, and anyway, we moved the wedding to Newry, to what was then the hotel in Newry that was owned by Dana's husband. It was bombed the day after our wedding, so we were never going to have any luck. The morning of our wedding, these 2 boys, Tony and Miles O'Reilly, were in their place. They were getting it opened, and in the early morning, and guys came in, shot them, and then set fire to them. And you can imagine, by the time my wedding was late in the day, and then the reception, and the reception just died, but nobody told us. But clearly, so I thought somebody had fallen out with somebody. I thought Martin's people and my people had a big row or something, over something. And I'm trying to figure what the hell went on. And we came to Dublin. We were spending our honeymoon in Kerry, chasing the man that we both idolised, which was Dan O'Connell. But we stopped in Dublin for the night, and I said, I have to phone home and see what was going on. There was something weird going on there, because my mum said to me as I was leaving, don't ring home, don't read any newspapers. And I thought that was very strange. So I rang home, and my youngest sister Claire answered the phone, and she couldn't speak. And she said, Mary, Tony and Miles are dead. They were murdered this morning. Because I had said to Martin, anybody see Tony and Miles? Where are they? Couldn't see them. Where are they? But then there was a whole lot of people, so you just kind of got lost in the crowd, and I never asked it again. So there you go. That was then. So I'm carrying that.
You're carrying a lot, Mary.
And I'm carrying it, and I'm also I'm from a family, thanks be to God, nobody among my brothers or sisters ever joined a paramilitary organisation, thank God. Yeah. I had a cousin who did, out of my 60 cousins, but none of my own brothers and sisters, God be praised. And I came from a family that was Dan O'Connell and John Hume mad.
This is for people who don't know. You're talking about constitutionalists, nationalists, pacifists.
Correct.
People who Martin Luther King would have looked to and shared from each other.
Resolve your problems through dialogue. Yeah. Talk. Yeah. Make your arguments persuasive. Find the places and the spaces where you can make your arguments, and make them in a way that does not conduce to hatred, that doesn't stir up raw passions. So that was what I came from.
There's a book that you brought in, and we're running out of time, so forgive me for making this a little brief, that you brought in that makes you laugh on occasion and brings you a bit of joy.
This is the one that really made me laugh.
Learning
the Law by Glanville Williams.
Why is this so funny?
I'll tell you why. So I got into law school. My parents were absolutely thrilled, because nobody belonging to them had gone to university. So now I'm going to go to law school, and the first thing that arrives in our house is a letter from the Faculty of Law at the Queen's University with a reading list. My God, I was on that bus. I was down the town. I was in the bookshop. I was buying the books. What's top of the book list? Learning the Law by Glanville Williams, Mother of the Divine. It's a wee short book, as you can see, a very little short book. So I take that and I have it read by the time I get home.
I bet.
And then I get to page, whatever it is, here we go, page 192.
Where is this going?
Ominous. Women.
Oh,
Women. And I go back to the start and I look, where's the chapter on men? Of course, there isn't one.
Come on.
No. And here's how it begins. It is difficult to write this section without being ungallant. Or is it ungallant? I don't know what that word is. Ungallant.
Yeah.
Parliament, it is said, can do everything except make a man a woman or a woman a man. In 1919, the Sex Disqualification Removal Act went as far as it could to perform the second feat. The results so far have not been striking. That's a reference to us being given the right to vote, incidentally.
hilarious.
Yeah. Practice at the bar is difficult enough for a man. It is heartbreaking for a woman. Imagine, she can't overcome the prejudice of the solicitor, right? Two prejudices are almost inexpugnable. Also, we hear this man never heard an Ardoin mammy. A woman's voice does not carry as well as a man's. What a heap of rubbish. What a load of rubbish. So I read that and I thought, you know what? Not a chance. I'm going to listen to that load of rubbish. And but it did say that women are slowly making their way into the profession. But when that was 1969. 5 years later, when I was called to the bar, and there were 3 women and 11 men called on that day, the Lord Chief Justice of the day, with a complete straight face, presented us with a hardback copy of Learning the Law. I couldn't believe what I was seeing here. I thought, seriously, now go away, will you?
Okay. We've got to head off into the sunset, but not before I ask you. I can't believe the presidency is like at the end of this conversation, but you are so compelling and so interesting. Your stories, the shootings, the bombings, the horror of that. You constantly keep missing being killed, being
Correct.
frank, which is extraordinary.
Correct. Because bear in mind, Ardoin, where I lived, had the highest incidence of sectarian murders throughout the Troubles.
This is here, and here we are. And all roads in some ways lead to the Áras Uachtaráin. You become president for 2 terms, 14 years. I can't help but think, and I'm not into cosmic, but you were meant to be here, or some might argue, and I don't want to.
Well, the moment was right. Can I put it that way?
So you become the candidate, and that was not without its sort of brickbats.
It's quite a campaign.
Terrifying, and that's why no one's putting themselves forward at the moment and give the elections.
They're right,
in
making
November.
a short campaign. If it's going to be miserable, don't extend it.
It seems to be the most horrible, mean-spirited, cruel campaign. I don't know why. For the most beautiful office in the land.
Because it is about the person.
But why does it get so horrible?
Well, I think part of it is because of the nature of the role. You're not a policy maker. I mean, I had a theme which was building bridges, and I had explaining what that was about, that it was about trying to bridge all those fragments or pull them all together.
As discussed.
Catholic, Protestant, North, South, East, West, with a very clear agenda. But it's a moral and a pastoral space. It's not a political space. Yeah. So I think it is important to really get to know the person.
Yep.
And to be tested quite deeply and profoundly.
But there's grilling and roasting.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, I looked at it and I said to myself, yes, there is, and you're right there. And here's the thing. I took the view, this is a very big interview, and you've got every voter is the person on the interview panel. But what you don't do, and what you should never do, is to be the interviewer of the other. I should never be someone who is not only interviewing, but critiquing the other candidates. And so I never thought it was my role to make little of them, because actually the other candidates, for the most part, were decent people. They were fantastic, actually, the people that I was... who were against me at that time. They were good people. But there was at least one of them, unfortunately, a man whom I knew well and who knew he was, that he was going down a silly path, who decided to make me, because I was the one with the most chance of winning. Now, he was in thrall to a couple of people, ex-RTE, as it happened, who were determined that they were going to use him as a vehicle to get at me. And and he made claims about me which were completely untrue, put my family in shocking danger. My children in particular had to be removed from the house because of the things that were said, and because we lived in the next village to us was a strong, in Northern Ireland where my family was a very strong loyalist stronghold. So that was mean. That was mean-spirited, and again, it was agenda-driven. I think it was improper. And in fairness to him, he dumped those people and he apologised to me. But at the same time, the damage was done.
Yeah.
And so my view of that is, look, let journalists and the people throw everything at you. That's fine.
Yeah.
That doesn't bother me, because at the end of the day, you're going to be there for 7 years and you're going to be the primary ambassador of the country in many ways. Yeah. People have to know.
A rigorous interrogation,
if it's not rigorous, you'll never. How do we probe the surface of the person? How do you know what they'll be like under stress? That's okay.
Yes.
But personalise as between the candidates, I think that is utterly unacceptable.
Tell me, if it's not too crass, low light, highlight of your 14 years.
Oh, yes.
Let's go low light and then we'll end on highlight. Low light, hardest moment for you.
Omagh.
Oh, for goodness sake.
Omagh.
How many people died in that horrible bomb?
Over 40.
Yeah.
And
we thought
it was
we were
after the Good Friday Agreement, and we were all on such a high, the Good Friday Agreement, and of course the twin referenda in May, overwhelmingly. Oh, yeah. Responded to by the Irish people. The yesness, north and south, that was wonderful. The future was set towards reconciliation and in a structured way. And then came August, and we were out. My father's from Roscommon, and we had his old home. So it's one of those tiny little, 2-room cottages, which had been our holiday home for donkey's years. So we're there with the kids, and we are walking down a little lane called Dardree, the forest, the oak forest of the kings, in a little place between Carrick and Shannon and Boyle, and it's the most glorious day. And a police officer comes tearing up behind us in a car and takes me aside and tells me what's happened. Now, I know Omagh well for this reason, that when I was first woman Pro-Vice-Chancellor of Queen's University, and one of the things that I did, along with my colleagues there, was to set up 2 satellite campuses, one in Armagh and one in Omagh. And that was my job. My job was to set those up, get them going. I was on that road to Omagh. Every week I was up and down the road to Omagh. I knew all the people there. I knew the local, the chief executive, for example, the local chairman of the local council, wonderful unionist guy. I knew them all because I was working with them to create this campus. And so I came back to the house and I said to Martin, obviously I'll have to go to Omagh. So the word back from here, from DFA and in particular from government and from the police was, under no circumstances can you go. It's too risky. So I felt, no, that this is where my own judgment has to be. I know these are people who don't understand what I understand. So I phoned the chief executive at that time, a great guy, and I said to him, John, what do you think? John, I'll never forget his words. He said, Mary, we need you.
Oh, good Lord. I
said, get in the car, we're going. So we went, and I can still hear ringing in my ears the advice from here, which was, this is dangerous. The unionist population will, they were not going to like this, even though it was Catholics, Protestants, dissenters. That everybody was murdered in that ridiculous evil. And so anyway, I get out of the car, and the first person who comes towards me is Alan Rainey, good Protestant, wonderful unionist guy, and he's the chairman of the local council. And he walks towards me. And this is the man who they're telling me, is going to tell you to go. And he just put his arms around me. And the two of us stood and bear hugged and wept and wept and wept. And subsequently, when I went to the funeral up in Buncrana, one of the boys who were killed, and we went up to Buncrana, David Trimble, whom I have not enjoyed a good relationship with. I mean, when I became director of the Institute of Professional Legal Studies at Queen's, unknown to me, he was the other candidate. Now, he had been my teacher at Queen's. He didn't get the job. It didn't go down well, can I put it that way? And also, in my early experience of him, he was quite the bigot. Now, he married well. He married the most wonderful woman, Daphne. Fellow student of mine, we knew each other well, and I always credit Daphne with softening his heart. And in fairness to him, he'd also delivered the Good Friday Agreement, which had been, and again, I would credit Daphne with putting a lot of pressure on him, because all around him, his colleagues were abandoning him. So, and we wouldn't have the Good Friday Agreement without him, in fairness. So, but I hadn't spoken to him in the months between. And I turned round and he was sitting behind me in the chapel. And I looked at him and he looked at me. We both stood up and we just both hugged and cried.
Did you really?
And I just felt so much stuff melting away from me that day. We were two changed people, really, in many ways, because our context had also changed. It had been changed by suffering, by utterly, absolutely wasteful, needless suffering. And in that moment, I could just see a different future for us. It was a terrible thing, but I was no longer worried about, could we reconcile? I knew it would happen sometime, possibly not entirely in my lifetime, but that there was the seeds were being sown, and out of suffering and more suffering. And tragically, we got to know we have a wonderful friend here in Dublin, Brendan Monaghan, who's a builder and did some great work for us. He was a fantastic guy. Any bits and pieces and good things you needed done, as Brendan would do them. His brother's wife and her mother were killed in the Omagh bombing. She was pregnant with twins.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I think with the Late Late Show with you one night, you had them all in the audience.
That's right.
And he was there. I beg your pardon, we talked about that. There were members of families were there. And I mentioned Brendan's brother, who subsequently had married. Many years later he married, and his second wife died very young of cancer. I mean, you just look at that and you think, what the hell right would I have to ever complain about any darn thing? When I think of the suffering that poor fella has endured and has had to come to terms with. So, yeah, I look back and I just think I've been very, very fortunate. And the Aras and those 14 years gave me an opportunity to be a healer to the extent that I could, and to build those bridges.
History will be very kind to you because you deserve it. I'm just going to say that as a fellow citizen. And and thank you on behalf of all the people who are grateful to you for what you did in that time.
You.
If I may say so, if it's not too pompous, I really mean that.
Lovely.
There's a lot of people, when I say I'm meeting you today, people smile and say we really enjoyed her presidency. My final question is the highlight of the presidency.
The highlight.
Yeah, the bit that made you most proud or happy.
A lot of people would say it has to be the Queen's visit, and that was wonderful.
Spectacular visit,
very healing. But no, it's not the highlight. There is only one highlight and ever will be, and that is standing in Croke Park on an evening, looking down at this sea of people who have flown in from all over the world for the opening ceremony of the World Special Olympic Summer Games.
Wow.
And I will never forget it. It was like we had been transported to another planet. And that wonderful song that Sean Davey had composed and that Rita Connolly, his wife, sang along with Ronan Tynan, may we never have to say goodbye, ringing in our ears. Mandela there. It was absolutely surreal. Just surreal. And the realisation, these were the Celtic Tiger years when we were accused, of being we got so up ourselves and selfish.
We call it notions, don't we?
No, we got notions. We got notions.
National notions.
Yeah. Except, of course, that we got an army of 60,000 volunteers. Yeah. We raised 60 million euro. We put on a show, and a show of hospitality, because many of these kids who came to us, they came with mummies and daddies and coaches, and they came with nothing. I heard of people who arrived to be hosted by families in Ashburn, and they literally came with not even hardly a pair of shoes between them. Wow. And it was local businesses, kitted them out with the best of clothes and the best of everything.
We saw the best side of ourselves, didn't we?
And then on the day they were all going home, the final piece of that story, they're at the airport and there's a fella standing there and he's festooned with medals and he has a bunch of gold medals, a bunch of bronze medals, he's got about 9 medals, right? And anyway, he's got 3 of everything. And there's a wee girl standing beside him. He's going to one part of the globe and she's going to another continent. And she's looking longingly at him. And she has a silver medal and she has a bronze medal. And they get chatting and she just said she'd love to be taking a silver medal home. And he takes one off and he puts it over her neck and he said, now you have. Wow. Unreal. That was... For me, that's it.
That's it. What a lovely hat. Our final, we've taken way too much of your time, but I just enjoy your company so much, and that's not Plumos. It's just a matter of fact, as we've talked about
thank
today.
you.
So the final question is about the autobiography you haven't written yet. Of course, you've written, and we know.
I have written
but
one.
But in between that and where you are in your life and your world now, can we have a title of how?
Yes. Well, I've at the moment working. It has now got 3 working titles.
Yes.
It started out because it's about my sort of faith journey.
Yeah.
And the working title at the moment is Circling Back, because I'm going right back to baptism, and which for me was clearly the most influential moment in my life, because it forever in perpetuity cemented me as a member of the Catholic Church, shapes your life, governs what you think, how you're supposed to, all of that. So it's circling back. But the very beginning, when the publisher asked me what title I had for it, I said, well, actually, I've got 2 titles. One is why, like Hans Kung's title, Why I'm Still a Catholic. And the other is Why I'm Not Still a Catholic. So a friend of mine who's married to a theologian, a great Sicilian guy, said to me, I've got a better idea. Why don't you call it Why I'm Still a Catholic, brackets or not?
Well, that kills all the birds of one.
Exactly.
Mary McAleese, what a privilege and a pleasure it's been to spend time with you today.
Listen, I've enjoyed the crack with you.
It's been lovely and such insight and philosophy and existential thoughts and yet, as always, accessible and intriguing. Listen, to you and your family, Godspeed. Go well.
Thank you.
And let's do it again sometime.
We certainly will, please God. I love talking to you and I love to see you happy.
Thank you, Mary.
You deserve it.
As you. And there you have it, another packed episode with some great book recommendations for you to enjoy, all brought to you by Eason, Ireland's favourite bookseller. So shop in your local Eason store or explore hundreds of thousands of titles online at easons.com. Order before 6 p.m. for same-day dispatch and enjoy free delivery when you spend over a tenner. Eason, be inspired.